Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
The Qatari-owned television network al-Jazeera has denounced what it calls an attempt to silence freedom of expression after Saudi Arabia demanded that the broadcaster be shut down. The Saudis, plus other Gulf nations leading a blockade against Qatar, have issued a list of 13 demands in exchange for lifting a draconian 2-week embargo. Qatar has been given just 10 days to comply. Matt Fry reports on this rapidly escalating diplomatic crisis.
The gleaming Museum of Islamic Art. In the distance, the skyline of Qatar, tiny but rich. In fact, the richest nation on earth per capita, thanks to gas. Well-kempt and aspirational, all wrapped up in theme park opulence. So why are these troops belonging to allied Turkey arriving in Qatar? Here's why. Reinforcements in times of brewing trouble.
The countries embargoing Qatar issue their formal list of demands.
There are 13 demands altogether, and astonishingly, they include shutting down the Al Jazeera news network, Qatar's most high-profile export. The kingdom has been under blockade now for almost 3 weeks. The allegation that Qatar supports the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, sponsors terrorist organizations like ISIS and al-Qaeda on the sly, and the big one, that it has sided with Saudi Arabia's enemy, Iran. Indeed, since all exports from Saudi have stopped, food has had to be shipped in from Iran. So how serious is all of this?
In the beginning, you find it offensive and totally ludicrous. But then you find it quite comical, because most of the points in it are either unreasonable, unrealistic, unproven, or totally inactionable. And simply, a lot of it is just fantasy. What is ridiculous is having this ill-prepared, ill-thought-through, fanciful 13-point document that even have errors in it to express the gravity of the situation in the Arab world.
The Saudi foreign minister talking to us in London this week begs to differ.
We're not saying what countries should or should not do. These are sovereign decisions that countries make on their own. What we're saying is that countries should, as they have, continue to weigh in and let the Qataris know very clearly that their policy of supporting extremism and terrorism must stop.
The Gulf was supposed to be the last peaceful corner of the Middle East. That was one of the reasons why Qatar is busy building stadia for the 2022 World Cup. So why is it now unraveling? Qatar is, after all, home to 11,000 US troops. It's from here that they launched their air raids against ISIS targets in Syria. And yet, after President Trump recently bonded with Qatar's foes, the Saudi king and the Egyptian president, he too described Qatar as a sponsor of terrorism.
I think, as a political analyst, that President Trump was played. He was duped by the Saudis and the Emiratis when he got to Saudi Arabia.
But the Saudis wouldn't have done this without the Americans giving them some sort of nod of approval. They just wouldn't have done it. So do you think that he was duped into giving them the green light?
Yes.
We in Britain are also caught in the middle of this web. Recognise this building? Owned by Qatar, like so much else on the London skyline.
Very nice to see you.
Thanks for having me. Very good to see you. Very good to see you.
The Qatari emir, product of Harrow and Sandhurst, treats this place like a second home.
We have very important investment in this country.
Another reason why what happens in Qatar doesn't stay in Qatar. This speck of a country is the fuse that could turn the proxy war between Saudi Arabia and Iran into a very real one.
Matt Fry reporting there.